Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello, it's Angela Fay from Canada's podcast. Today, we are discussing the number one problem with traditional events. And we're going to offer valuable insights on how to leverage events to create an upswing in profits and client fulfillment. So this is a must-listen podcast for all event producers and entrepreneurs who are in the business of bringing people together for positive impact. With me today is Leor Rotchild, an author, keynote speaker, and consultant with over 20 years of sustainable business experience. You have met Leor before here on Canada's podcast. He was executive director at the Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, where he was leading the charge to aggregate the best of sustainability heroes into a powerhouse for good. And he led a 500% membership growth. So introducing once again, Leor. He is the senior director at Upswing Solutions. We're going to talk a little bit about Upswing later, but right now he is launching a book called How We Gather Matters. Leor makes the case for better utilizing major events as a powerful platform for societal change. And we're going to lay out a bit of a blueprint for you for a more purposeful, inclusive, sustainable approach to bringing people together. Leor, welcome to Canada's podcast.
Thanks so much. It's such a pleasure to be back with you. I so loved the experience we had previously, and so great that we can build on it, but also talk about a subject that's quite new and different, and I think really topical as everybody's gearing up for the spring and summer event season. There's so much happening, whether it's kind of like music festivals, sporting events, conferences and trade shows. So all of this is in scope of the kinds of things that I'd like to elevate on people's radar.
Awesome. And I mean, post-COVID, right, where we've been trapped in seclusion, now is also a fantastic time. Any of the reasons why now is actually the best time than any other time in history, why events are important from your perspective?
Well, yeah, so many reasons. So let me just draw out a couple. Starting with what you just said. During the pandemic, the events industry was decimated. No live events were happening for at least a couple of years. Some events are just coming back now, in fact. And event organizers certainly financially went through a lot of difficulty. And one of the things we learned in that period, even as so many events pivoted to online events, there were a lot of studies that came out that actually showed that people's brain development were affected by this sudden change, and that there is a legitimate case to make from a mental health point of view, overcoming isolation, and that we know now more than ever that the experience of stimulating one's brain through human connection and attendance at events that stimulate people and have them meet new people and learn new things and experience something out of the ordinary is something that we need fundamentally.
Awesome.
And that it's not just a nice to have, it's really important for human development. So I think that case is stronger now than it ever has been before. So I think that's one thing. The other really interesting thing is that if you were a younger events professional graduating from university, going into the industry right at the time that the pandemic hit, that's like a few years without any work as you're just starting your career. So a lot of young people pivoted away from events, went, and took on other jobs that were more in line with, sort of the, virtual isolation kind of careers and jobs that existed. And many of them have not come back and will not come back. And so there's a bit of a lost generation of people. And so the events industry is now in this moment where they're coming back with a bang. we need these events more than ever, and there is not as much capacity and a desire to want to sort of make up the financial gap that existed. And when you add in this element of like, well, hey, preferences have changed since you last did this. Now there is so much more focus on diversity and inclusion than there ever has been before. There's such a focus on climate change and sustainability in a way that has never been seen before. And these folks who are putting on these events are challenged to incorporate this kind of thinking because they're resource constrained, and the space has just moved really fast in this direction. So I love events. I just I've always loved attending them. I've loved working on them. And for me, I've seen that, so many events are wasteful. I've had this kind of like, I want to say front row view, but it's actually more like a behind the scenes view of what happens at so many different kinds of events. And so many of the wasteful things don't need to happen. And from the point of view of all these people are traveling and flying to your event, like, how can you justify that in a world where we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint? These events are sort of like carbon events on steroids. And so I've written this book as a way to help people maneuver through these constantly changing, rapidly evolving issues and deal with what I think are some of the biggest, most important issues that event providers, event producers are facing right now.
And I'm going to add a little bit, which is, the technology advancements that we have now, right? From biometrics and digital events. And, I see a huge opportunity for hybrid events, right? That the incorporating the health and longevity and wellness factor of being in person with, the global distribution, the on-demand sort of factor with the technology and the digital side of it as a huge opportunity that, takes a different mindset and a different level of experience like you offer in order to deliver those events.
That's a great point, Angela. And let me just build on that to say that I think that probably if you're in the events business, you're hearing a lot of like vendors telling you, if you want to keep up with your competitors, you need to go to all this like event tech, stuff that's emerging and has been developed over the last few years. And that's going to be a way to continue to compete with others who are in this space. And my feeling on that is, one, yes, obviously that space is also evolving quickly, but if you want to move into that space, it's important to answer the question, how does this align with the kind of purpose and culture that I want to establish in my event, especially if I'm trying to cater to an audience that's increasingly concerned about climate issues and about like equity and justice issues and inclusion. And if you're sort of vendors are helping you get there, then great. But if they're just kind of selling you the latest gadget and whatnot, then it might be an opportunity to say, hang on, this is a critical juncture. We're not just going to continue to spin our wheels and look at our limited resources in a superficial way, but actually look at how to deepen the meaning of these kind of human connections and gatherings that we're all responsible for.
Stay ahead of the game with our expert tips and strategies that will help your business thrive in a digital era. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
So we are going all over in my sort of, list of questions, but I want to go back a little bit to put some context and some measurables around what is the problem with traditional events. We talked generally about them, but if we can put this, into what can an event producer or a business director or owner do on Monday to know what is the problem with the events that they've got coming up or the way that they've been thinking about events in the past. What are the risks? What is the actual cost of those problems? Could you elaborate on that a bit for me?
Sure. And it's always tough to summarize all kinds of events, right? Because we're in my book, How We Gather Matters, I'm speaking to people that attend and organize music festivals, sporting events, conferences, and trade shows, and each one has like very different dynamics and challenges and opportunities. But if you're in the outdoor events business, the idea of like being fined by municipalities and local governments for the mess you leave behind, the land you disrupt, if waste goes into the local river watersheds, like these are significant issues that are now associated with fines like they never have been before. So that's kind of like a significant change. The cost of everything is going up, as we know. The cost of suppliers is going up. The dependability of suppliers is going up. So actually thinking through a more kind of like meaningful way to build relationships with suppliers who are also very committed to the environmental goals that you have as an organization is one more way to really bring your suppliers closer, not only to your purpose, but also into the process of actually delivering something that will help you to get to where you want to be. And are there some cost savings associated with that? Potentially, yes. But more importantly, it is a way to sort of build a loyal and dependable supply chain, which is really important. And similarly, I would say that the clients, the sponsors, and the people who attend events are so much more aware that their publicly stated values are showing up at these events. And so, if a client is saying, okay, I want to hire you as an event organizer to put an event on for me, but like, I don't want you to increase the, significant climate footprint or greenhouse gas footprint that I then take on as my scope 3 emissions. I want you to be committed to my goals that my investors are telling me is important. And so therefore we've made a public commitment around. So it is a way to get more business. It is a way to demonstrate to your clients and your audiences that you are aligned with the priorities they have, in this movement towards a more carbon constrained economy and future. And I'll just add one more thing, although I could add more than just one more thing, but one other that I think is really important is that, we're seeing a shift that, gone are the days when it was sort of like really exciting to create like these exclusive kind of experiences for a very sort of, kind of like elite sort of, a group of people who could pay for these experiences. If we know that events are aligned with this idea of like overcoming isolation and being part of a community and potentially a movement, if the event is really trying to do something. For example, if you're organizing a climate conference and haven't to actually engage your audience in how they can reduce their footprint, you might be missing an opportunity to create a movement around your goals, right? So that's kind of one example. But all of these things require reaching more audience members, reaching more diverse people who have been traditionally left out of the conversations, removing barriers to people who might identify in certain ways or have mobility or hearing challenges. And really, the things that I'm speaking about in my book are ways to remove barriers, create more inclusivity, and really think through the kind of footprint and the quality of the event experience.
So just as a recap in my notes, we've got actual costs, right? Which are things like fines, You might have more expensive expenses dealing with, companies or suppliers that aren't in alignment with you. There's a potential cost of breaching your integrity or trust of your principles. And but also there's lost opportunity, right? And the lost opportunity, some of them you can't see them. Usually you can't see them because you don't have enough perspective, and that's where somebody like yourself can come in, or we can, and say, listen, here's opportunities in our network and spheres of influence that we see that we could add value to your event. So those are at least two things that we talked about in that. Can we also talk a little bit?
Summary, Angela. Thank you.
Can we also talk a little bit about other upswings? You mentioned them, but you quickly touched on bigger business opportunities, more fulfillment. Just can you expand on what that means for you?
Yeah. So really the tagline of the book is grow your audience, shrink your footprint, change the world. And so really what I'm talking about is an approach that is more purposeful, more sustainable, and more inclusive. And so, yes, in terms of the opportunities, it really is around ensuring that you're differentiating yourself and attracting more clients, more sponsors, organizations that want to be aligned with your event, because it's a way to demonstrate like their brand, their impact, their purpose. And so the alignment there is really important, and I think is an opportunity that isn't always clearly achieved. And sometimes it's not achieved because, events are events, like they're on autopilot. We know we need to, open the doors by this date. Therefore, we need to secure the food by this date, and et cetera. I'm inviting people to sort of look at the bigger picture and imagine all these opportunities. And some of those opportunities also really are about attracting that next generation of young people who are going to be the event professionals, but also the event goers.
Right.
We're at this like passing of the torch of baby boomers who are now, no longer the majority of like income earning demographics in the market. And so therefore, perhaps a phasing out of that demographic as like the key clientele for many event organizers and many businesses across the economy. If you want to attract a newer generation of people that are going to be loyal to these events and go every year and want to like work for these event organizers, like they want to see values alignment and it's a much more diverse workplace and workforce than there has been in history. Very educated people coming from all around the world, and they're picky. And with the virtual work situations that exist, they could literally work for just about anybody. They have options. And so you want to attract talent in your workforce and in your audience. Like these are a set of very practical tools that align with progressive values that many of the younger demographics hold today.
So I'm going to jump a little bit. Let's talk about, if you could share with us a couple of stories of events that you've been part of, or you've witnessed, or you've consulted with that have actually produced an upswing. Could you give us some case examples?
Sure. So one story in my book that I really loved, and I loved telling this story, and I loved actually helping to create this story and case study. And it was with one of Canada's largest events. So the Calgary Stampede, which takes place in Calgary every year and has taken place for more than 100 years. So quite a proud institution. And, one of the other reasons I love telling stories about the Calgary Stampede is because I think some people have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. It's so big. It kind of takes over the city, and and it does have a big footprint. And it's got this, sort of cowboy kind of reputation where some people, when I have told them that I've worked on environmental programs with the Stampede, they say, "Oh, really? They do that?" I would have thought they, like roll it up, burn it, shoot it out of a cannon or something,
Right.
And, I love dispelling the myths around that, because the story that I share is really one that talks about a social impact combined with an environmental program. And so the Calgary Stampede shut down after like 100 years of like doing it through hell or high water. But the pandemic was the thing that made the Calgary Stampede cancel for the first time. It was a couple of years before they started to really bring back the key programming around the environmental impacts. And when they called me and said, "Hey, we need you to come back and do that great environmental program where you captured all the recycling and compost across the site,"
Mm-hmm.
I had to tell them, you know what, like I'm quite busy with some other projects, and I, sort of wrapped that environmental services business that I had when when the pandemic hit. Why don't you call a few other people? They called me back and said, "Yeah, all those people went out of business too. Let's figure this out. Let's make something happen." And I called around to old crew members who helped to deliver that program. It is, kind of, there's a lot of people involved in that. So and so moved on to banking. This person's doing this, waste management work with a municipality. Anyways, I took the opportunity to the Center for Newcomers in Calgary.
Okay.
And they were able to help staff this program and help train them up to be able to have a number of people who were refugees from Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine, and other places, so that they were delivering this, world-class environmental program for the Stampede. For these people to have the Calgary Stampede on their resume as their first Canadian job is kind of a big deal. And the Calgary Stampede wound up hiring a number of them on full time after the 10-day event was over. So it was a really great story where they were able to continue this legacy program that had terrific measurable results, and provided a valuable service to the food providers who were on site. But I think equally, or maybe more important, is they were able to create this incredible community impact for people who, frankly, don't have access to the same opportunities that the average local Calgarian would have.
Canada's podcast is your gateway to success in the world of entrepreneurship. Start listening today. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
Leor, we talked about the Calgary Stampede. I mean, it's one of the biggest events on Earth. I think they call it the greatest showcase on Earth. So let's
greatest outdoor show on Earth. Yeah.
Greatest outdoor show on Earth. How about for the small and medium business owner? Let's, if we could just make it the next part of this conversation a little bit more relevant for them. And I understand you have some launch events coming up. And what about, so are you incorporating some of your best practices from your book in some of these events? Can you share some details?
Thanks for asking that. Having researched so many of these best practices, I'm able to incorporate them into my own events. And so, as you noted, I've got a bunch of launch events where we're going to celebrate the launch of the book in different online and in-person forms in different cities. And some of my favorite sort of ways to incorporate some of the sustainability and inclusive kind of initiatives that I'm writing about in the book include like a fairly inexpensive solution for audience members who might be more hard of hearing. And so there's an AI powered closed captioning technology that you can get, and there's a number of service providers that offer this. So it's just generated live on demand, and for anybody that might be looking away from the screen or not, seeing the screen, they can even access it on their mobile device. So they can they can still be part of the conversation, even if they can't hear everything. Another really interesting initiative that I think is really easy to incorporate, and very few people that I've seen do this at their events, is like an on-site childcare program where you can get an organization like an organization called In a Pinch Event Services, and they actually have like trained professionals who have all their background checks and lots of licensing and credentials to work with young children, and they can actually take some of the young children and create arts and crafts with them that align with the theme of the event. So
That's
I'm
cool.
doing
That's fun. That's fun.
Yeah, so they're doing like a sustainability themed arts and crafts thing with young children. And what's great about that is so many people say, you know what, I would love to come to the event, but I just need to see if I can figure out childcare for that night. And it's kind of like, bring the kids, right?
We've got that solution fixed.
Childcare on site, right? So it's a more inclusive way to include parents in the important conversations that we want to host. And then, of course, food is such a big part of any events. And so really working closely with a food vendor and selecting the right caterer or food vendor that has really thought through the sourcing of the foods. Ideally, like vegetarian and vegan has a lower footprint than meat products, which are associated with methane emissions, for example. And so, but really putting thought into like really unique pieces that can be offered to audience members. And then for any food that's left over, having a partnership already established, so you don't have to rapidly figure it out after the event, but like having something set up with an organization like Leftovers or Second Harvest or another food rescue program where any leftover food is donated to a great cause. And there's a great misconception out there that, there's liability issues associated with donated food. That's usually a myth. There's lots of cities, states, provinces that have passed legislation to protect people who donate food. But the best thing to do is just partner with a local organization who already has those existing relationships. They know where to send the food, how it needs to be boxed up, and they can come in and actually do that at the end of the event to make sure it gets to people in need, that there's nothing that's going to be wasted, and that there's a lot of thought put into the overall footprint associated with the food at the event. So for anybody who's coming to one of my launch events, you can see these things in action. So I don't just need to, talk about it, that I can show you. And I think cool. that's the most important thing that event organizers can do is walk the talk. When people see it in action, they're like, oh my gosh, we're living in the future now. Why can't I have this reality in every event I go to? Why can't I have this every day, not just the few hours or the few days that this event is taking place?
Leor, I just want to highlight, and I'm just going to encapsulate what I heard you say, which is a lot. But what we have in common is, the future is happening right now. There's a lot of solutions that you can incorporate to make your event bigger with very simple solutions, like bigger impact for more people. I think in our sort of preliminary interview, we're talking about how, and don't underestimate that your event where it might be 20% impact has a ripple effect of impact that not only just in the event, but it's ripple effect and it becomes infectious. So if you're setting a new standard in events, and your pillars that I heard so far just in this interview is zero waste, right? Like up-leveling the client experience so that you've taken care of all of the details. So it's almost there's no reason for them not to say no to attend, right? You've removed all the barriers. It makes it so much more fun. So fun is a third factor. it's healthier, right, for yourself and the environment. And, overall, it's a holistic experience. So for those who want a demonstration, can you give us an idea, Leor, of where your launch events are happening yourself, your launch events? Where can we meet you and tap into your expertise and experience them for real?
Well, thank you for that setup. So, Calgary is my hometown. So, having a big launch event on May 9th. Really excited about that and would love for everybody to attend. I am in the process of organizing a number of online events as well as events in Edmonton, Toronto, hopefully Vancouver, maybe New York. So, if you are interested in having me, in partnering with me on an event in your hometown or having a book launch as like a side event for your big conference that might be on a similar theme, get in touch with me at leor.ca. That's where I'm posting about all of these events. So that's also where you can see the upcoming events that are planned. And I'd love to get in touch with you and collaborate.
And just to summarize, because I know this, so that the book is there. The book is online now, so you can, there's absolutely different ways that you can get a hold of your book. What are your favorite ways?
Well, thank you for that. So leor.ca is definitely an easy place to go to not only see upcoming events, to get in touch with me, but also to purchase the book. You can also get it on Amazon. But I also like to tell people, hey, you know what? Support your local bookstore. Go into your favorite local bookshop, and if they don't already have it on their bookshelf, then ask them to order it in for you.
Awesome. Also, you mentioned you are a speaker. You've got not just speaking about why events matter, but you've got some other keynote presentations up your sleeve. Can you just share a little bit about what you could, how you could speak at other people's events?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Angela. So definitely, like if you go to leor.ca, I've got a summary of the talks that I give, and typically it is around sustainable events, sustainable supply chains, energy transition, and a few other topics that I'd love to speak to more audiences about. And so I have been doing a number of public and keynote speaking events. It's kind of like fun when you're putting out a book. People like want to know what you have to say. So I'm really enjoying that experience. Would love to do more of it. And so certainly for anybody that's looking to have a speaker at their next event, I'd love to know about that and connect. But I'll also just add, Angela, that my day job, the main hat that I wear, is as a sustainability consultant. So Upswing Solutions is the company that I work with, and we work with a real diversity of clients, but certainly also work with event organizers, and would love to work with more event organizers.
And it's at both, like if you've got an event that's already being planned, I mean, I think probably on the ideal, it's in when you're in the idea phase, you can work with you on the ideation and the design phase, consulting, but also on you can come in now. Could you come in now and actually with something that's partway in design and say, hey, here's how we can consult with you to improve it? Can you do both?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
okay.
So there's some, that saying, the best time to have planted a tree or started a plan was like
yesterday,
20 years ago. Yesterday maybe was also a good time, but the next best time is right now,
today.
Today. Yeah. And so we can start anytime. And the main message here is get started. There's so much to be done. And there's demand for it. There's the demand is there. So it's important to get started. And one question I often get is, where is the right place to start? I would say there's like two key things to keep in mind. One is really understanding like what's important to your stakeholders. So your stakeholders are, your clients, your sponsors, your funders, your partners, your audience members, your staff, right? So understanding what's important to them. That might be as like rigorous as something that we call in the sustainability consulting world a materiality assessment, but it could also just be a simple survey to try and understand what's important to people. And then setting a baseline and understanding what are you currently measuring? How can you expand what you're measuring and understand what is your current footprint? And that's going to be the point you improve upon. So if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, and really just start to understand where you're having. So even if your event is tomorrow, you can start today to decide, here's what we're going to measure this year. It could be our power, could be the weight of the waste that we offload to the landfill, could be a number of other factors, but it's just a matter of like, can we measure it? Let's get a process in place so that we can at least understand where we are. And I'll just add this one more thing, which is often when I talk to event producers, I ask them, do you think that the global events industry has a bigger or smaller footprint than the fossil fuel industry? And, one could guess, but nobody actually knows that information because the data isn't there.
Wow.
The data's not there. Yeah. And the events industry kind of doesn't really see itself as like an industry. You've got the weddings, you've got the conferences and trade shows, you've got the, like festivals. One of the things that I'm really advocating for in How We Gather Matters is to see every single gathering, every single event as an important part of changing the world. And it starts with collecting the information so that we can roll it all up to say, this is our collective impact as events around the world, or events locally, or events nationally. If until we have that basic information, we don't actually know how big the problem is. So that's why I'm really advocating, get started by just understanding your current footprint.
That is fantastic. Well, and I have the privilege of, having a little bit of inside scoop on what the contents of the book are. So again, we are talking about How We Gather Matters. We talked about the problem with traditional events. We gave lots of insight, lots of value. Thank you, Leor, for listeners on, generally how you can improve your events. But absolutely, please reach out to Leor if for the book or speaking opportunities or some consulting on how to improve your event coming up. Or if you have an idea about an event that could make big impact, now's the time to reach out to Leor. And is there anything that we missed, Leor, that you feel like people should just hang on to?
I love doing these podcasts with you. You covered a lot of ground, and so I thank you for that. I'll just end with encouraging people to once again visit leor.ca, get in touch, and think about how to grow your audience, shrink your footprint, and change the world.